Dr. John singing, "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?" Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report, I'm Amy Goodman. While the collapse of this country's financial system continues to send shockwaves around the world, I'm joined on the telephone by best-selling author of The Shock Doctrine, Naomi Klein. Her latest article for the Huffington Post is called "Now is the Time to Resist Wall Street's Shock Doctrine." Naomi Klein, welcome to Democracy Now!
Thanks, Amy. Great to talk with you.
Explain, what do you mean?
Well, the thesis of my book, what I mean by the shock doctrine, is that it is in times of crisis, it is in times when people are panicked, when we've seen again and again the right push through radical pro-corporate policies, what they call free market reforms, precisely because it is in a crisis where the space for debate rapidly closes, and you can invoke this state of emergency to say we have no choice. And I think we're seeing a very dramatic example of this tactic right now, with this really extortionist kind of tactics playing out in Washington. You know, sign this blank check, or we're all going down, or Main Street's going down, or taxpayers, the sky will fall in on them. I'm also arguing that this is only stage one of the shock doctrine. They're getting this. They're lobbying for this huge bailout, obviously. But this bailout is a kind of a time bomb, because it's all these bad debts, and they are going to explode on the next administration. I mean, we know that the Bush administration has already left the next administration with huge debt and deficit problems. They've just exploded those, expanded them, and what that means is that whoever the next president is going to be inheriting this economic crisis that is being exacerbated by this bailout. So in the case of McCain, I think if he's the president, then I think we know what he'll do, because we know he wants to privatize Social Security, which is something that Wall Street's been wanting for a long time, another bubble. We know he has said in the first 100 days of his administration, he'll look at every program and either reform it or shut it down. This is really a recipe for economic shock therapy. So while you have all of these trivial issues being discussed in the election season, I think what we're really, under the surface, they're actually being quite clear. They're going to if they take power, it'll be in the midst of an economic emergency. They'll invoke that emergency to push through very, very radical changes. So, what I've been saying is this is not 4 more years of Bush. It's much, much worse in the case of another Republican administration. But there's huge problems for Democrats as well if they win this election, because we need to only think back to the situation in which Clinton took power, where he ran an election on an economic populist platform promising to renegotiate NAFTA. Then there was an economic crisis. Clinton came under intense lobbying by people like Robert Rubin, who's also advising Obama right now. And by the time he took office, he had embraced economic austerity. So people need to understand these tactics, need to put pressure on the candidates, the parties, and reject this tactic. And I've actually been really heartened, Amy, that people are on to these shock tactics and aren't falling for it. And, to the extent that we're seeing a little bit of spine from the Democrats, it is only, as Chris Dodd said, because they're hearing it from their constituents. So people need to keep up this pressure right now.
Naomi Klein, one of the things you write about in this piece in Huffington Post is the wish list that comes from former Republican House Speaker Newt Gingrich, laying out policy prescriptions for Congress.
Yeah, I mean, there's pressure being put on Congress from Democrats who we've heard the proposals to cap executive pay and to have a moratorium on foreclosure. This is coming not from all Democrats, but from some. But there's something going on the Republican side where you have people like Newt Gingrich, and you also have the Republican Study Committee, which is a group of very influential Republican lawmakers who are saying that they're opposed to the bailout, and they also have their wish list. And I think that it's not that they're going to oppose a bailout completely. It's that they want economic changes, right-wing, pro-corporate economic changes attached to a bailout. So Newt Gingrich has his list. He's got 18 demands. But I think even more important than that is the Republican Study Committee, and I raise this because they've just issued their ransom list. It starts with suspending the capital gains tax, privatizing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, suspending mark-to-market accounting, which is the rule that requires companies to assess their assets at the current market values. So what's so stunning about this, Amy, is that here you have a crisis that everyone seems to agree is born of deregulation. And they're actually calling for more deregulation. We have a situation where the debt is exploding on American taxpayers, and they want to suspend corporate taxes, which is actually what might defray some of those costs from regular taxpayers. So it's an incredible display of opportunism, and this is what I mean by stage 2 of the Shock Doctrine. The first stage is just the bailout, but the second stage are all of these radical reforms that are going to be invoked in the name of the crisis that the bailout is creating, whether it's pushed through right now or whether it's pushed through later. But what's important, Amy, in the book, I talk about. I start the book with a quote from Milton Friedman that has really made the rounds a lot lately, which is that, and this is a Friedman quote, that only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change, and when the crisis occurs, the change depends on the ideas that are lying around. And then he goes on to say that I believe is our basic function, to keep the ideas ready until the politically impossible becomes politically inevitable. So I think it's really important for people to look at the ideas that are lying around. There's enormous corporate lobbying going on to, for instance, eliminate the post-Enron collapse regulations, to actually say that the way to save the American economy, you heard Henry Paulson still equating the interests of the financial sector with the interests of everyone else. We know that's simply not true, but it's precisely that logic